Super Troopers 2001 looks like a dumb stoner comedy on the surface, but underneath the syrup-chugging chaos is a surprisingly clever, risky, and almost failed indie film. Made by the Broken Lizard comedy group, the movie survived studio doubts, brutal test screenings, and financial uncertainty before slowly becoming a cult legend. Almost every iconic moment people quote today existed on the edge of being cut, changed, or never filmed at all. Fact 1. The opening scene almost killed the movie's legendary opening prank scene. Was considered too aggressive by studio executives during early test screenings. Audience members reportedly walked out before the movie even reached the 10-minute mark. Fox executives worried viewers would hate the cops immediately and lose sympathy for them. One executive even suggested cutting the entire scene completely. The Broken Lizard team refused, arguing the movie's identity lived in that moment. They believed if audiences survived the opening, they'd love the rest. The studio compromised by slightly trimming the scene instead of removing it. Ironically, this exact sequence later became the movie's most quoted moment. Today, it's often ranked among the funniest comedy openings of the 2000s. What almost destroyed the film ended up defining it forever. Fact 2. Broken Lizard were almost fired mid-production during filming. Fox reportedly lost confidence in the Broken Lizard group multiple times. Executives felt the humor was too niche to weird and too slow for mainstream audiences. Daily footage screenings caused concern rather than excitement. At one point, replacing the directors was seriously discussed. The cast sensed the tension and feared the project would collapse. Budget pressure made every shoot day feel like a final chance. The team tightened scripts on set to avoid delays. Several jokes were rewritten minutes before filming. Despite the pressure, the group stayed united and stubborn. That stubbornness saved the film's tone and originality. Fact 3. Most of the movie was shot in freezing conditions. Although the movie feels sunny and laid back, many scenes were filmed in bitter cold. Vermont locations brought unpredictable weather and brutal night shoots. Actors often wore thin uniforms while temperatures dropped below comfort levels. Visible breath had to be avoided, forcing rushed takes. Cast members drank warm liquids between shots to stay functional. The cold made long dialogue scenes physically exhausting. Some outdoor jokes had to be shortened because actors couldn't last. Despite this, the discomfort added realism to the troopers' boredom. The environment mirrored their dead-end career frustration. What looks relaxed on screen was often miserable off-camera. Fact 4. The cast were paid very little up-front. Most of the Broken Lizard members accepted extremely low salaries. They chose creative control over immediate financial gain. Several cast members slept in shared housing to save money. Some crew members worked for reduced rates, believing in the project. The gamble was risky because the film had no guaranteed success. If the movie failed, many involved would walk away empty-handed. Merchandise and DVD sales later became their real payoff. The cult following turned financial failure into long-term profit. Years after release, the film continued earning steadily. Patience rewarded the risk they took early on. Fact 5. Many jokes were built from real police stories. Several comedic moments were inspired by real law enforcement anecdotes. The writers interviewed officers who admitted to extreme boredom on patrol. Petty rivalries between departments were exaggerated but very real. Prank culture among cops directly influenced many scenes. Some jokes were toned down because reality was even worse. The casual abuse of authority was intentionally played absurd. Broken Lizard aimed to mock systems, not individuals. This grounding made the humor feel authentic rather than cartoonish. Viewers who worked in law enforcement noticed the accuracy. That realism helped the movie connect beyond stoner audiences. Fact 6. The movie bombed in theaters but exploded on Super Troopers performed poorly. During its initial theatrical run, marketing failed to explain what kind of comedy it was. Many viewers assumed it was a cheap police parody. The box office numbers disappointed the studio. However, DVD rentals told a completely different story. College students discovered it through word of mouth. Repeated viewings revealed hidden jokes and callbacks. Quoting the film became a social ritual. Its reputation grew stronger years after release. The movie's real success happened at home, not theaters. Fact 7. The actors often broke character during shoots. Maintaining composure during filming was a constant challenge. Improvised lines frequently caught cast members off guard. Multiple takes were ruined by uncontrollable laughter. Some scenes took dozens of attempts to complete. The syrup drinking scene required several resets due to breaking. Directors sometimes encouraged chaos to capture genuine reactions. Improvisation blurred the line between character and actor. This looseness created organic comedic chemistry. Not all improvised moments made the final cut. Those that survived became the most memorable jokes. Fact 8. The movie was never meant to get a sequel originally. Super Troopers was planned as a one-off comedy experiment. The creators didn't expect longevity or franchise potential. Years of fan pressure changed that reality. Quotes, memes, and conventions kept demand alive. The cult status grew stronger with time instead of fading. Studios eventually noticed the persistent fanbase. Crowdfunding later proved how deep the loyalty ran. The sequel only happened because fans wouldn't let go. Few comedies age this way. Super Troopers refused to disappear. Fact 9. The maple syrup scene was far worse. The Night Looks maple syrup scene is remembered as gross, slow, and hilariously uncomfortable. But behind the camera, it was one of the most physically punishing sequences in the entire film. What many fans don't realize is that the production initially insisted on using real maple syrup to preserve visual authenticity, which immediately created problems for both performance and safety. Real syrup is incredibly thick, extremely sweet, and difficult to swallow in large quantities, especially under hot lights and repeated takes. Within minutes of filming, actors began experiencing nausea, dizziness, and intense gag reflex reactions that made continuing nearly impossible. The syrup-coated throats, teeth, and tongues, making dialogue increasingly difficult to deliver with clarity or timing. Costumes became unusable after only a few takes, as syrup soaked into fabric and hardened under the lights. Continuity quickly turned into a nightmare because syrup levels in containers changed. With every reset, cleanup between takes slowed the entire production, forcing crew members to scrape floors, props, and furniture repeatedly. The smell of syrup lingered on set long after filming wrapped, making the environment even more uncomfortable. Actors pushed through the scene despite physical discomfort, knowing the joke depended on commitment rather than exaggeration. Eventually, the syrup had to be diluted slightly to prevent actors from vomiting on camera. Even with dilution, the scene remained physically demanding and mentally exhausting. Several takes were ruined simply because actors couldn't keep the syrup down. The crew debated cutting the gag entirely, but knew it was too central to the film's identity. That raw discomfort is exactly why the scene still feels disturbingly funny decades later. Fact 10. Brian Cox played his role as pure Dramabrian Cox, approached Captain O'Hagan with the seriousness of a Shakespearean role. Rather than a broad comedy character, he deliberately avoided comedic exaggeration, believing humor works best when authority figures feel authentic and grounded. Cox never attempted to sell jokes or soften his performance for laughs. His frustration, anger, and exhaustion were played completely straight. This decision created a powerful contrast between his grounded authority and a trooper's chaotic behavior. Rather than competing with the comedy, his seriousness amplified it. Scenes became funnier because he refused to acknowledge how ridiculous the situation was. Cox's delivery gave weight to otherwise absurd dialogue. Other actors adjusted their performances to react naturally to his intensity. This dynamic gave the ensemble structure instead of noise. Without his presence, the film risks becoming shapeless chaos. Cox effectively anchors the entire story emotionally. His authority feels earned rather than mocked. That realism keeps the film from drifting into cartoon territory. It's one of the quiet reasons the comedy still holds up. Fact 11. Early versions of the film were too weird to survive it. First cuts of Super Troopers were significantly longer and stranger than the version audiences eventually saw. Test screenings revealed that many viewers didn't know how to process the humor. Some jokes lingered too long without payoff. Others pushed characters into uncomfortable or unlikable territory. Studio feedback was blunt and unforgiving. Executives demanded faster pacing and clearer structure. Broken Lizard fought to preserve the soul of the movie. Several beloved internal jokes were cut entirely. Some scenes slowed momentum beyond recovery. Others felt too inside baseball for general audiences. The group learned restraint without abandoning identity. Deleted scenes later surfaced online. Hardcore fans appreciate them, but they confirm why cuts were necessary. The final edit found balance between weirdness and accessibility. Survival required sacrifice. Fact 12. The police rivalry is rooted in reality. Rivalry between the state troopers and local police departments wasn't invented for comedy. Real-world law enforcement agencies frequently compete for jurisdiction, funding, and recognition. These conflicts often turn petty rather than professional. broken. Lizard exaggerated behavior that already existed. Insults were inspired by real attitudes officers admitted. To authority clashes fueled multiple scenes. Ego mattered more than public service. No side is portrayed as competent or heroic. Everyone appears childish and insecure. That choice was intentional. The film mocks systems, not individuals. Power becomes absurd when boredom sets in. The humor stings because it's recognizable. Audiences laugh, then pause. Truth hides inside the joke. Fact 13. The film aged better than its peers. Many comedies from the early 2000s rely heavily on pop culture references. Super Troopers largely avoided that trap. Its humor is rooted in behavior and power dynamics. Those themes never expire. Physical comedy remains effective regardless of error. The film trusts silence and awkwardness. Jokes breathe instead of being forced. Rewatching reveals layered humor. Background details reward attention. Dialogue improves with familiarity. Nothing depends on trends. Nothing feels locked to a specific year. That timelessness protects the film. Time sharpened it rather than dulling it. Few comedies are that lucky. Fact 14. Fans rescued the film after failure. Theatrical audiences largely ignored Super Troopers. Fans discovered it later, slowly and passionately. Dorm rooms became screening halls. Quotes spread without advertising. Inside jokes became cultural shorthand. Costumes appeared at conventions. Online forums kept the movie alive. Merchandise sold quietly for years. Social media reignited interest. Later, crowdfunding proved loyalty wasn't nostalgia. It was devotion. Studios noticed too late. The audience never disappeared. They waited patiently. Love outlasted marketing. Fact 15. Super Troopers redefined failure by box office standards. The movie failed by cultural standards. It survived. It proved opening weekends don't define legacy. Word of mouth matters more than promotion. Niche humor can thrive. Creative stubbornness can pay off. Ownership matters. Authenticity wins. Audiences find what speaks to them. Sometimes slowly, sometimes quietly, sometimes years later. Super Troopers waited. Time rewarded it. Failure didn't end the story. Super Troopers never begged for approval. It trusted its own stupidity. It let boredom become comedy. It mocked authority without apology. The movie didn't chase relevance. It waited for discovery. Cult classics aren't created by studios. They're adopted by audiences. This film wasn't loved instantly. It was loved permanently. Time sharpened its edge. Rejection didn't erase it. Patience saved it. And decades later, people are still quoting it. Not because it tried to matter, but because it never tried to change.